The midterm of the Verkhovna Rada's work ended in May. Society has put a lot of faith in this parliament, which was elected after Maidan. People hoped for swift changes in the work of the parliament. We haven't seen any yet. Maybe you have? What progress has there been since the start of the European Parliament's special monitoring mission to Ukraine?
I think after Maidan that the demand of the people of Ukraine is for a new democracy, a modern democracy, and a reformed state. This is a huge responsibility for the people's deputies in the Verkhovna Rada. And I think a considerable amount has been done. There is a saying that Rome was not built in one day. And when you take on the whole transformation of a society, it's a very big job. I think a good start has been made. I would give a number of examples. I think that the e-tendering system has taken away a lot of the potential for corruption which had existed to do with public tenders in the past. I think the e-declaration system brings more transparency to what are the interests of the elected members in terms of their private interests. I think this is important. I think the willingness of the Verkhovna Rada and its leadership to work with the European Parliament, to work with USAID and NDI and UNDP to consider reforming the Parliament is already important. That they open themselves, they open their minds, they open their doors, they open to advise all of the factions, all of the committees. This is important not because it delivers immediate results, but because it gets people reflecting in a detailed way on the need for reform and change in the institution itself.
More than a year ago, the Verkhovna Rada voted on adopting your proposals as the basis of their reform. Since then, we haven't seen any concrete changes. Very often in the Ukrainian government, we see imitations of reforms and declarations, but nothing is implemented.
Well, I think the first absolute requirement is for reform to work in Ukraine. It can only be owned by Ukrainians. So we can assist, we can stand by ready to help, we can offer advice, we can introduce the practice from other European parliaments or from the European Parliament. But the ownership of reform must belong to the people of Ukraine, and in the Parliament must belong and be accepted by the people's deputies and the factions in the Parliament. So I would say on the positive side, we had two pillars in our reform programme. One is the administration of the Parliament, the apparat, and the other is the functioning of the Parliament as a political institution.
In terms of political will, in your opinion, are there any votes for your proposals in the Ukrainian Parliament?
The only honest answer I can give you to that is I do not know. We have made a clear recommendation on those things, and we believe that a correctly functioning Parliament should do this. These norms, cultural values, what does it mean to be elected as a parliamentarian? This is something that needs to be worked on. These are not the norm that many parliaments would accept. And so the question of the culture, the values of the individuals in the institution needs to be focused on. And I think one of the elements in this, if I could say, is the kind of work that you do or civil society does or media does, not to do big exaggerated stories, but to tell these truths and to show to the public and to the electorate and to show to deputies that someone is watching, and that because someone is watching, they are reporting, and because they are reporting to the public, it's an ingredient that can help to change the climate.
If I understand correctly, you are quite optimistic that the Verkhovna Rada will vote for your proposals.
Look, I am not naive. So you asked me, optimistic, pessimistic. We have a duty to be optimistic because the people of Ukraine in the revolution of dignity have demanded a new Ukraine. And I think this is one of the ingredients in a new Ukraine, is to develop a strong, capable, independent parliament that follows good norms and good ethics. Foreigners cannot make Ukraine's future. Ukrainians can do. And the thing I like about the approach we have, it is respectful of the integrity of Ukraine, respectful of the independence of Ukraine, and even if I could disagree with details, the biggest point to make is this must be done by Ukrainians in Ukraine for Ukraine. And that's why I have some optimism, because things are happening, even if slowly, and much patience, because I understand change is always complicated. But I think the duty is to be optimistic. And the duty is to be optimistic for the whole of this society, because a lot of blood was spilt on Maidan. And now the time has come to spill the sweat in building the new Ukraine. And that takes sometimes many hours and lots of arguments. And we're helping in an environment to spill some sweat for Ukraine, even as unhappily people still spill their blood in the war in Donbass.
I would like to know your opinion on one more thing. It is difficult to make decisions in the Verkhovna Rada, as we have seen in previous cases where they try to trick society by making subtle adjustments. For example, the situation with e-declarations for NGOs was a small amendment within a law. How would you describe this approach to lawmaking? Because despite criticism from the West, the amendment has not been overridden.
Of course, like everyone else, I have my opinions. But I have not expressed those opinions because I work with all of the political factions. I don't have to agree with any of them, but I have to work with them. And I want to have their goodwill and work with them in a respectful way and understand that they will do the politics in Ukraine. However, on this question, I do make an exception. I think this was a very bad error of judgment. I think it is a bad law. I think it has many implications that were not properly thought about or debated. I think it's like taking a step backwards. I don't like it. I would love it to change, and I'm happy to speak in a way that condemns it totally.